Good morning. Welcome to our online worship service of Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. The link is in your chat. At the top, I see lots of people have already submitted chats, so you'll have to go straight to the top to find it. Whomever you are and wherever you have come from, or whatever your comfort with digital technology, for this hour, we are one gathered congregation and all are welcome. My name is Beth Wilson. I serve on the worship committee and have loved this congregation and this fellowship for many years. Our worship leader this morning is the Reverend Carol McKinley. Carol serves as the Faith in Action affiliate minister of the Olympia Unitarian Universalist congregation. It's been some months since we have had the opportunity to welcome Reverend McKinley into our pulpit. What a joy to have her with us this Sunday. I'd like to welcome any visitors. Please introduce yourself in our chat box. We welcome more interaction with all during our after-service Zoom coffee hour. The link for the coffee hour is, I'm putting it into the chat right now, and the password is equality. You will need to use the password equality to be admitted to the coffee hour. If you are phoning in today, welcome. We want you to join the coffee hour by phone. So get a pencil. The number to call is 1-253-215-8782. The meeting ID is 438-451-134. And the password is 8533-2070. The announcements are on our webpage at kuuf.org or in our weekly email newsletter, The Candle, which you can sign up for on our website. We would like to start today by acknowledging that the land on which we all live is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish, the Sklallam, and the Skokomish people. They have lived in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's Central Salish Sea for thousands of years. These tribes still live here and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Now please enjoy Brian Kenny's playing our call to worship, Praise to Springtime, after which Reverend McKinley will read our opening words.
We are living in the greatest revolution in history, wrote the late theologian Thomas Merton. He said, "This is a huge, spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race. Not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep, elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been, a revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something we have chosen, nor is it something we are free to avoid." Good morning, everyone. It is so good to be with you this morning. And although we have been distant physically, I have been reading the candle every week to follow your events at Kitsap UU Fellowship. And I was in your congregation when you did the wonderful ordination of the Reverend Margot Reinhardt, which was my first online ordination in which I had been a part. So again, it is good to be together with you, even on our screens. Let us light our chalices together with these words. We light this chalice as people open, hopeful, and ready for the future. May we move forward together to seek what is good within and around us and bring that good to the world. And now let us sing together our opening hymn, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. The lyrics will appear in the on-screen video.
Please join me in the spoken affirmation. The words will appear on your screen. We gather as a caring community, seeking life's deeper meanings. We value diversity and affirm the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. Now it is time for our morning offering. If you would like to donate electronically, please click in the PayPal account that I just am putting in the box, in the chat box. You may then email admin@kuuf.org to let us know if your donation is for the KUF General Fund or the Minister's Discretionary Fund to help our members in need, or our monthly charitable giving recipient for the month of July, the Bremerton Food Line. You may also send your check to the address on the screen. Please write in the memo line to which of the funds your offering should go. If this is your first time at KUUF, you are our guest, so there's no need to contribute. Let there be an offering to strengthen and sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us.
And I have my volunteers.
Epic volunteers.
Nathaniel and Jacob.
We're also grandchildren. That's one reason.
It is nice to have you, my friend. But today's story is really fun.
It's a pun.
Or a metaphor.
An epic metaphor.
Should we start reading?
Ready, set, read. Is there really a human race?
By Jane Lee Curtis and Laura Cornell.
Is there really a human race? Is it going on all over the place?
When did it start? Who said?
Race, set, go.
Did it start on my birthday? I really must know. Do I warm up and stretch? Do I practice and train?
Do I get my own coach?
Do I get my own money?
Do I race in the snow?
Do I race in a twister?
Am I racing? Am I racing my friends? Am I racing my sister?
If the race is a relay, is Dad on my team? And his dad and his dad?
You know what I mean.
Is the race like a loop or an obstacle course? Am I a jockey?
Or am I a horse?
Is there pushing and shoving to get to the lead?
If the race is unfair, will I succeed? Do some of us win?
Do some of us lose?
Is winning or losing something I choose?
Why am I racing? What am I winning?
Does all my running equal speeding?
I get off track when I take the wrong turn. Do I make my way back from mistakes? Do I learn?
Is it a sprint, a dash to the end?
Am I aware of the time that I spend, and why do I do it? This zillion-yard dash.
If we don't help each other, we're all going to crash.
Sometimes it's better not to go fast. There are beautiful insights to be seen when they last.
Shouldn't it be that you just try your best? And that's more important than beating the rest?
Shouldn't it be looking back at the end that you judge your own race by the help that you lend? So take what's inside you and
Make big, bold choices.
for those who can't speak for themselves,
Use bold voices. And make friends.
love well
Bring art to this place.
and make the world better.
For the whole human race.
That was a really great story. Thank you. See you again soon.
Now it is time for our joys and sorrows. Though we are physically distanced from one another, our hearts and spirits remain connected. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows lessened. If you have a joy or sorrow to share, I invite you to put it in the chat this morning, and I will read them aloud. Well, I don't see any coming in. I hope that doesn't mean there's a technical problem. Oh, here's one, good. Morgan's joy is that he got a loft bed. Oh, Morgan, how exciting. We're happy for you. And from Lisa, I'm grateful to Beth and the worship team for putting this service together. Thank you, Lisa. Well, while we wait to see if there's any others, I'll just share that I had a joy this week, my 70th birthday. And so I feel like 70 is a new 50. From Bonner, joy that all my friends and family were safe yesterday on our 4th of July celebrations. And, oh, Melinda, happy birthday, Beth. Thank you, Melinda. The Emmets. Beth, my birthday was on the 2nd. I think that was Nathan's birthday was on the 2nd of July. So his was even more recent than mine. Oh, wait a minute. So, that was Genevieve. Ditto. Happy birthday, Beth and Nathan. Sorrow. Oh, this is from Kitsap UU Fellowship. I think that might be Annie. Sorrow, the loss of our friend Liz Drew. Oh, I don't know who put that in, but Liz was a dear friend of mine, and so it's a sorrow for many of us. It's true. This is from, let's see where to go. Joy for my mom, Randy. She has been a great friend to me, especially during this time. And that is from Matthias and Bunny. And from Chris, it says, grateful for our daughter, Maria. Happy birthday. Oh, Paul put in Liz Drew. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. May you who shared this morning feel the love of this community surrounding you and holding you close. And for all those whose joy or sorrow is too tender to share, our hearts are with you. May the spirit of life and love bring peace to us all. Amen, and blessed be. This reading is from the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. Following the ratification by the Second Continental Congress, this declaration was issued on July 4th, 1776. Its second sentence became the world's best-known statement on human rights and reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." It goes on to say, quote, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, unquote. Then, following an enumeration of the abuses by the English monarchs suffered by the colonists, the Declaration of Independence concludes with these words, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Please join together for a moment of silence, followed by Brian Kenny's gift of music.
In her poem, Equality, Maya Angelou writes, "You declare you see me dimly through a glass that will not shine, though I stand before you boldly, trim in rank and marking time. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free. But if I'm just a shadow to you, could you ever understand? We have lived a painful history. We know the shameful past, but I keep on marching forward and you keep on coming last. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free. Take the blinders from your vision. Take the padding from your ears and confess you've heard me crying and admit you've seen my tears. Hear the tempo so compelling. Hear the blood throb in my veins. Yes, my drums are beating nightly and the rhythms never change. Equality, and I will be free. equality, and I will be free. Yesterday marked the 244th anniversary of the day American colonists officially challenged British rule and declared their independence. I personally have a ritual of rereading the Declaration of Independence on the holiday to remind myself of the spirit that proclaimed the colonists' right to govern themselves. Thomas Jefferson, the primary author, wrote in that noble document that the right to life and liberty were provided by God the Creator to all men. To those sitting in that steamy July room in Philadelphia in 1776, those rights were self-evident. They were, after all, men, mainly property owners. Now, as the Declaration was circulated throughout the colonies, how many wives, household servants, or farm laborers saw themselves in those words? How about the Native Americans in the villages on Philadelphia's outlying areas? The slaves cutting cane on Carolina plantations? We know that the equality bestowed on all men was not the reality. It was not even the vision of the framers. Now, although they were all schooled in progressive Enlightenment philosophy and values, they still lived within the values of and the culture of their day. They knew what the term all men included, and they knew who was excluded. Today, those words call us to recognize the vast chasm that exists between the concept, the ideal of liberty and justice for all, and the reality of liberty and justice. As greater awareness of the different ways words are interpreted by new audiences, each of us is learning to look more critically at what we read, at what we hear, and to do so through a different lens, a lens that can be enlarged or closed to move the words into greater focus. Now, generally when I read, I initially accept the words from the author's perspective. I read with the grain, absorbing and interpreting words that generally align with the author's understanding and social location. Reading with the grain means that the reader is seeing through the author's eyes, accepting the writer's perspective and interpretation. Here's just a classic example. The with the grain reading of the Cinderella story offers an ideal image of romantic love, love that struggles and transcends the cruelty of the wicked stepmother, transcends a young woman's fate to be a scullery servant. The with the grain reading offers a message that dreams of a romantic rescue by a prince can come true. But there are other ways to read the Cinderella story. How might it be read against the grain, questioning the commonly accepted understanding? Well, it might show the love interest to be a shallow man who judges women solely on the basis of physical attractiveness. Now, a man who will marry a woman on the basis of a few hours of dancing is likely to leave Cinderella if someone with daintier feet comes along. An against the grain dominant reading points out the misogyny inherent in the societal structures surrounding Cinderella. Now, today we are seeing against the grain readings of visual images as well. Recently, Quaker Oats announced it would retire the Aunt Jemima syrup label, acknowledging that it was established around a stereotypical image of the African American servant. Being asked to read against the grain, to pay attention to how those who do not share my skin color, my social location might interpret words and images I have long seen as normal has opened my eyes. Events of the past 6 weeks, deaths of unarmed Black men and women at the hands of law enforcement, the outrage of people on the streets of Minneapolis, Seattle, Atlanta, London, have opened many eyes to the different ways our stories are told and retold. I know I am called again and again to look deeply at my role as a privileged white person in the widespread suffering of people of color in our culture. Blindness to the evil of racism is white privilege. I can afford to turn away, ignore inequality. But no one can ignore the reality of videos recording the murder of a man. This reality and its call to end the many injustices suffered by people of color demands changes to the systems that have not only allowed, but often encouraged such injustice. But perhaps this time, seeing the horrific cell phone video of George Floyd's 8-minute and 45-second strangulation death under the knee of a police officer, we will not use our privilege to again turn away from injustice, but will see and hear the cry of Americans to stop the brutality, to stop the inequity, to stop the deaths of people of color. Cries to breathe life into those words. All men are created equal, endowed with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's time we are called to read against the grain, to see our culture through another's eyes. And there's much we can do to expand our own vision, our understanding of how people of color, indeed all those living on the margins of our white majority culture, struggle to be seen. Ajioma Oluo, the author of So You Want to Talk About Race, invites us to be part of a much needed conversation. A conversation even more important these days, where marchers are on the streets and editorial after editorial offers perspectives on the whys and whats of America's original sin. Oluo, an African-American queer woman based in Seattle, draws on her own experience to offer some suggestions for those of us who are white and want to more deeply engage in anti-racism work. Writing in 2018 from our liberal corner of the United States, she observes, yes, they, meaning people in Seattle, they could rage over global warming and yell about conservative political shenanigans, but they would not say a word about racial oppression and brutality facing people of color in this country. Well, no longer can we afford those discussions. Oluo offers ways to avoid defensiveness when faced with the frightening prospect of being called a racist. Ways to continue talking even when it might be painful. She offers some specific suggestions that hold true, I think, for all difficult conversations. First, listen. Listen to the voices protesting in our cities. Listen to the voices that have been there all along. Listen to the words and listen to the experiences, the pain of those who know firsthand the visceral fear, when pulled over by the police for a broken tail light, or followed around the store when shopping for a new shirt. Second, when listening, remember you do not have all the pieces. You are not living as a person of color and cannot fully understand the impact that systemic racism has on our neighbors. Despite our best intentions, a comment or response can be hurtful. Third, nobody owes you a debate or even a learning opportunity. It is very difficult, says Oluo, for a person of color to call out racism. And so microaggressions can build. The molehills accumulate and become a mountain. She suggests that if a comment or action offends, apologize. And just remember, your perceptions are not theirs. Oluo offers other suggestions as well in her book, then adds, so why do we not talk about racism if it is so risky? No, she says, why do we talk about racism if it's so risky and so painful? Because not talking about us is killing us, she says, because for so long, the burden of racism has been on us alone. She believes that it is possible for those of us who are white to be more honest, more real in our relationships with people of color. And she shows her readers what is possible and invites us into the conversation. Those of you who participated in last week's online Unitarian Universalist General Assembly heard a similar message in the worship services and in the workshops. Race was at the center as speakers and participants addressed our long history as a liberal religious denomination working for equality, liberation, and human rights. And we've all read that history or in our congregations. The predominant voice of the Transcendentalist Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson prior to the Civil War was calling for abolition, deploring the earlier compromises that continued what he called the immoral destitution of slavery. Theodore Parker and many other Unitarian ministers were leaders in the abolition movement. Yet, abolition of slavery did not change the makeup of their white congregations or of white ministry, a pattern that continued for the next 150 years. Despite regular attempts to address the predominance of whiteness and the structures that allow institutional racism in Unitarian Universalism, efforts generally fell short. Just 3 years ago, 2017, the hiring of yet another white denominational executive resulted in conflict and resignations within our faith administration. But it also led to immediate changes. That summer, Kitsap UU Fellowship was among the hundreds of our congregations that held a white supremacy teach-in to explore how systemic racism has affected all of us, white, black, all people of color. And these were very difficult conversations. No one likes to think of themselves or our liberal religious tradition as white supremacist. We learned together that that term, white supremacy, applies not to us as individuals, but to the system that has made whiteness the accepted norm and has shaped our world in this country. That white supremacy is the water we swim in. That year, the Commission on Institutional Change was formed to look at Unitarian Universalism's past and at how we can shape a more inclusive future. At General Assembly last week, the Commission released their report, Widening the Circle of Concern. And that book is an amazing accomplishment. It looks at our past with honest eyes and sets forth steps that can help us move forward to becoming a more inclusive faith that lives into the promise that Unitarian Universalism holds for us and for the wider world. And knowing this fellowship, I am sure many of you will get copies, form discussion groups, ponder the Commission's findings and its recommendations. There is much we can do to expand our vision of becoming a more inclusive faith, a more inclusive nation. Oluo's words apply to our liberal religious tradition as well as to the larger community. Not talking about race is killing us. For too long, the burden of racism has been on us alone. It's not time to step back. It's time to read against the grain, change our understanding of and engagement with race in this country. As Naomi Klein and other General Assembly speakers emphasized, these days offer an amazing opportunity to change the narrative, to engage rather than retreat. Today, more people are demanding that entrenched systems in this country change: law enforcement, education, healthcare, financial institutions among them, and respond to the needs of everyone. Change begins by acknowledging our history as a nation and as a religious tradition. White people must look deeply at our role in widespread societal suffering of people of color. Getting past our denial that racism is an entrenched American problem, and yes, engage with the evil of racism. Blindness is white privilege, allowing us to turn away. Let's work to build relationships. Worry less about why people of color do not attend our congregations, and more about why we do not meet, visit, and interact with people of color in their congregations and community events. Yes, join those marches and protests, wearing masks and distancing, using every possible means to ensure safety of everyone. We are all part of an unfolding story. And as characters in that story, we must acknowledge that all stories can bring different meanings to each reader or listener. Let's work hard to recognize and appreciate others' perspectives. Change asks us to do three things: acknowledge each other's truths, act to bring about change, and atone for the wrongs of the past. Now, that word atone may be uncomfortable for you, as it might be for many Unitarian Universalists, but it actually means working to make a wrong right. Yes, I know you specifically, you yourself did not harm anyone. However, you, I, and many of us have benefited from inequity, and let's work to make it right. Atonement can be personal, but it can also be collective. Belong to a union? Ask why the membership does not reflect the true racial makeup of your community. Why the schools teaching your children have no teachers of color, or why some schools receive a larger share of funding while others go without. The lens through which we hear the stories of others matters. Let's make sure our eyes and all our senses are fully open, seeing different faces, perspectives, open to the histories that have shaped our neighbors' lives, open to the histories that have shaped us. Acknowledge injustice, apologize for our individual and institutional part in it, and atone by working for change. Andrew Rodriguez, the former director of Washington State Commission on Hispanic Affairs, said, "When white people do talk about race to me, they often end by saying that change takes time. And I tell them, what a privilege it must be to tell other people they must wait for what you already have. Change takes courage, your courage." He concludes, if done with humility, an open mind, and an open heart, this stuff works. It's a way to humanize each other. It requires constant nurturing, work, patience, forgiveness, and yes, faith. So I encourage all of us to read against the grain with open hearts, humility, and love. Let us be truly open and welcoming, possessed of the will to expand our vision, expand our world, that when we say those words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that the we includes everyone. May each of us move forward to nurture deeper understanding, doing so with patience, forgiveness, and faith. Amen. And so may it be.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
I invite you now to set an intention and to choose your word for the week ahead. You can choose one word or 2 words or even 3 words. And if you feel called to put them in the chat, I will read them aloud. Lisa says, against the grain. Marty says, perseverance. Bonner says, do the right thing. Matthias says, reflection. Jackie says, education. Marcia says, bringing awareness with fierce care. Ellie says, understand. Cheryl says, listening. Edward and Kirsten say, participate. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your intentions. Our closing hymn, Come Sing a Song with Me, is performed by the KUF Choir and Brian Kenny, our music coordinator and accompanist. I hope you will sing along.
Come sing a song.
Thank you, Brian and choir. That's one of my favorite hymns. Our time together is finished, but our work is not done. May our spirits be renewed and our resolve be strengthened as we meet the challenges of the days to come. This chalice flame is extinguished until we meet again with the spark and ignite it with the spark of our communion. Amen, and may peace be with you. All are invited to greet each other during the coffee hour. The link to join is in the chat. Remember to use the password equality. And I look forward to seeing you during the coffee hour.